Hello and welcome to the CFCR Fringe Flyer for Friday, August 3rd. I'm Ishmael Darrow. The spaceship you're hearing in the background is courtesy of Winnipeg's improv comedy group Outside Joke. You'll hear more from Outside Joke later in the program. Also on the show today, Franny Rollick interviews Kirk Fitzpatrick and Allison Cousins from Cathedral City. But first, an interview with Jeff Culbert, star of the Donnelly Sideshow. The Donnelly family, originally from Ireland, moved to southern Ontario in around 1850, and over the next several decades, they definitely made a name for themselves and became notorious for their fights and various other crimes that were attributed to them, although who knows how accurate that really was. They were murdered. 5 members of the family were murdered on February 4th, 1880, and they've gone down in history as the Black Donnellys. However, my guest Jeff Culbert, who stars in the Donnelly Sideshow playing at the Fringe, he disagrees with some aspects of this myth, and he's here to talk to us about it. Jeff Culbert, welcome to CFCR.
Thanks very much. Good to be here.
Now, what is your interest in the Donnelly family? And maybe you want to give some background about how important it is where you grew up.
Yeah, well, very interesting history in a way, because I grew up in Lucan, and Lucan is where the story happened. It's Biddulph Township, and it's a village called Lucan, and that's where it all happened. But when I was growing up, we're talking 60s here, I guess, it was pretty taboo subject, and people would come in looking for Donnelly, wanting to know where the gravestone is and wanting to know how they could get information, and there was nothing, because the town was basically quiet about it. And that's part of the weirdness of the story, is it was very, very suppressed over the years. And one, if I can give you the main reason for that, would be that even though 5 people were killed and it was by their neighbors and it was a mob and there were lots of people involved, it should have been pretty easy to find out who did it or who was involved. No one was ever convicted of the murders. And therefore it just became this kind of a shut it out, put it away, and don't talk about it, because a lot of the local people were involved or their relatives were involved.
Now, it's certainly a throwback to a wilder time in this country's history, that not only was this family so rambunctious, but the fact that essentially a lynch mob of sorts ultimately led to the murder of 5 members of this family.
Yes.
It's horrible to think about today, but was it really that unusual back then for this sort of justice, or this sort of vigilante justice?
I think it was unusual. It was certainly unusual in Canada. I think in Ireland, where they came from, it was a little bit more common, this kind of thing. The extreme poverty, this sort of oppression by the Brits, and that means what happens is you get an alternative justice system within your society. In other words, there's the official law, which in Ireland would be the British, but that's not really respected by the local people, and they have their own unofficial systems, ways of dealing with things, and hierarchies, and that's where a lot of the kind of nasty stuff can happen, because it's not rule of law, as you say. It's more local law. And I think what happened was, even though Southern Ontario was being settled at the time, the area where Biddulph was really just being cut out of the bush, in the sense of it was all trees, and it was a mass migration and land grant for these Irish people. So you can call it pioneer, more for the time, 1880, it was quite pioneer, if I can use the word. And the other thing was, it was a little bit Wild West, if you use the American kind of analogy. People moving in and things got done, and it was a little bit beyond the legal system.
Now, I think most people, when they think of the Donnelly family, there's been songs written about them by Steve Earle and Stompin' Tom, but I think most famously, there was a book called The Black Donnellys,
yes.
And I think you take issue with the representation in that book.
Well, it was a book that was written in the 50s, 1950s, and it was a pulp fiction book, and it was kind of based on the very common perception of who the Donnellys were. And my view is they were pretty much scapegoats. They might have been a rough family, but they were pretty much scapegoated, as in, the Donnellys are the bad guys. And when the Donnellys got eliminated, it was almost like this sense of they kind of deserved it, because, as according to this book title, they were the Black Donnellys. They were the bad. So he took the notion of, he took the sort of common community notion that the Donnellys were bad, and wrote the story accordingly. And that view was the dominant view for many, many years. And it wasn't until the 60s and 70s when some researchers and poets and playwrights and musicians started looking at the story more carefully and saying, wait a minute, this is not all just the Donnellys. And it's like over the decades and the centuries, really, the century anyway, there's this sense of trying to get a more fair view of what really happened there. And that brought up a lot of the old animosities, because if you're going to take the Donnelly side and try to see the perspective, that kind of means that the vigilantes are back in the spotlight for what they did.
It played last night at the Cosmo Senior Center, and it plays again Saturday at 2:10, at Sunday at 5, and again Monday at 6:30.
Right.
The full schedule, of course, is available online. What is how familiar are your audiences generally with the story, and then how do they react to your telling of it?
Yeah, I was really interested in this because I just did Hamilton, very, very well known in Hamilton. People know the story. And here, you check it out, and it's not quite as much as in Southern Ontario, because that's where the story originated. But people do know the story, and it's from that book that you mentioned, The Black Donnellys, which is still in print, and people still use it in schools. I hope not for history, because it's not really it wasn't written as an accurate history. It was written, the guy wanted to make, tell a good story and make some money. But the other one is the James Rainey trilogy. There was a trilogy of plays in the 70s, and it toured all across the country. And I find that some people know it through that, and other people have known it through documentaries they've seen on the History Channel. But it's so I'd say probably the Black Donnellys book and the James Rainey trilogy of plays, probably the foremost ones. And then there's been so many books, and you mentioned Steve Earle and Stompin' Tom. And Earl Haywood had a whole album that he recorded in the 60s about the Donnellys. There's a guy in the East Coast named Hector McIsaac. He just did a whole album about 2 years ago, whole album on the Donnellys with music and songs. So it's like so many things in history you find out about through the artists, right? It's the artists who write the stories, and if the story's engaging, it gets passed on. And the Donnelly story is one that it's just so rich. It's got so many great characters, and the story, just the true story, is so amazing that I think it grabs people. And I really find that once I got on the road, I realized that, most of the time during a show, it's total focus, because the story is pretty engaging. And so I find that audiences, whether they know the story or not, really have been reacting well and following it very closely.
Well, you've taken the Donnelly Sideshow to a whole bunch of different cities in Canada, including London, Regina, Winnipeg, Edmonton. But you've also performed it in your hometown of Lucan,
yes,
where, of course, the Donnelly tragedy took place back in the 1880s.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that growing up, it was not really something people talked about. So for you to do a play in your hometown about the Donnellys, that was actually sympathetic to the Donnellys as opposed to the traditional view. How did that go down?
Things are changing. I remember they started changing in the 80s when for the first time I saw, like a Donnelly hat, with a Donnelly thing on it, or a T-shirt, and I went, wow, I never thought I'd see that. But as time goes on and people die off and so on, it does become more where people. It used to be people outside of Lucan who were writing about it, and the people in Lucan and area were just wanted to leave it alone, did not want to be known for the story at all for various reasons, some of them quite obvious. But people have embraced it in the last little while, and there's even a museum that was put up in Lucan 4 years ago, the Lucan Area Heritage and Donnelly Museum, and so that's a real turnaround. And there were still people saying, don't do this. We don't need this in town.
We don't want to reopen this whole chapter.
Yeah, but it's not as fiery as it was, because I knew a guy, Peter Colley, playwright, and he wrote a play called The Donnellys for the Grand Theatre in London, and he had threats. He literally had threats. He had people standing up on opening night and saying this, yelling out, this is a bunch of crap, and walking out, and so on. So the fiery thing was there. That was in the 70s. And as time goes on, it's kind of mellowed out, and people are going, okay, we can actually talk about this.
The original tragedy ended up killing the patriarch of the family, James, his wife Joanna, their son Tom, was it their niece?
Their niece Bridget.
And another member of the family who wasn't killed at the first house.
No, they went off. They were actually trying to kill Will Donnelly because he was the sort of brains of the family and the the ringleader in a way. He was sort of the head of the Donnelly faction, some people would describe it. And they went, and he came out of his door. This is 2-3 in the morning, and when he came out of his door to answer the call, they shot the person who came, thinking it was Will Donnelly, but it was dark. They didn't know, and they actually killed his brother who was staying overnight.
His brother John Donnelly.
His brother John, yeah.
And over 130 years later, we're still talking about it and trying to get some sort of justice. Now, finally, before we leave, you have added to the body of music devoted to the Donnellys. You've actually written 4 songs, original songs that are part of the Donnelly Sideshow.
Yes.
Which one do you recommend?
Let's go with Boney Crossing the Alps. That's the this is a true story. This is the one that I didn't write the music for. This is a true old fiddle tune from Ireland, and Will Donnelly played this tune. The vigilantes were coming, not at the during the murder, but a few months earlier. They were coming to intimidate him, and he got out the fiddle. Instead of getting his gun out, he got out the fiddle just to kind of defy them and confront them with music. So I wrote that story. And based it on that tune.
The show is the Donnelly Sideshow, and it plays at the Cosmo Senior Center during the Fringe. Do check it out. The next show is tomorrow, Saturday at 2:10 in the afternoon. Jeff Culbert, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I am here with Kurt Fitzpatrick and Allison Cousins. They are both part of the team that makes up Cathedral City, is playing at Cosmo Senior Center with the Fringe Theatre Festival here in Saskatoon. And so, welcome, guys.
Hi.
Do you want to tell me just a little bit about the play, I guess?
Well, let's see. We're working on coming up with a description of the show, so this is good rehearsal for us.
Yeah.
In case you interview us again and we have to get the same question. Let's see. The show is based on, it comes from my experience I had in the last year where I had a very serious back injury and a resulting surgery from that. So there's a storyline of that goes through the show. But then throughout that I do more like outlandish characters who have their own stories that run through the show, but everything kind of relates to the same subject matter in some way or the other.
Yeah, there's a thematic through line of the piece. It's sort of exploring nightmares in a comedic way. It's really neat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The bit I saw last night at the preview show was all about time travel. I mean, you're talking about this journey, but how does time travel come in, I guess?
Yes, that's right. That's my character. I'm a time traveler.
Yes, well, the time traveler, yes, there is a time traveler in it, and he has a little story that goes throughout the show. So he's one of the characters that goes through the show. Everything kind of links up in some way. Like the time traveler is telling a story about his time machine, and one of the people he's telling the story to is his friend Marvin, who has a sandcastle on his head. And this sandcastle was built on his head when he fell asleep on the beach. A little girl, a little 4th grade girl named Reese built this sandcastle on his head. And so Marvin has to stand in a museum from opening to closing because it's such a beautiful piece of art on his head. So like we see the time traveler story, then you see Marvin with the sandcastle on his head, and Reese has a story as well. So they all kind of like siphon off.
And so you play all the characters.
Yes, it's a one-person show.
Yes, yeah. I'm just going to stay on this time travel just one more time. Time travel sometimes has rules. You know, all these different shows have different, you know, how far back can you go, whether you're affecting things. So do you does it touch on that?
No, not really.
It's all over the place?
I think there's a rule in time travel where you're not actually supposed to confront yourself sometimes, but he confronts himself.
Yeah.
And, I don't know if things are altered because of the time traveler, but yeah.
I think his essence, the most important thing about the time travel is he's a huge narcissist. He's incredibly fascinated with his own story. And I think having that character within a solo show where you're telling your own story is really interesting. And plus he's very funny. He's a very funny man. But he's very dark in that way, in that he goes on these fantastic adventures, but most time travelers travel because they're interested in exploring the world at different time points and all of that stuff. Whereas this time traveler is very interested in meeting himself and having experiences for himself. The other scenes we see him traveling in, it's very much he's out there having a good time. And so it's quite different than traditional time travel shows.
Yeah, and he's telling his friends he had all these experiences. You know, I was in the Spanish-American War and I was at the Stone Age, but let me tell you the story about how I sold myself, and that's what he's fascinated with. Yeah.
So on the other side, some of these other characters is there, you know, the selfless character to sort of the flip side of the coin, or tell me about some of the other characters in this.
There's a character named Mary who was actually in the last show that Kurt did as well.
Oh,
Mary,
yeah, right.
The Last Straight Man. And she, in Last Straight Man, is a waitress, and she's sort of the guiding character within that show. She talks to most of the other characters and sort of guides them a little bit. And at the end, we see her leaving the world and going off to find love. And what's interesting is you don't need to know any of that, but her heart comes through in this show as well. She's actually Reese's mother. So we see her a little bit later in her life with a child. And she has this really interesting heart. And she really cares about her daughter, and she cares about how the world works. And in a really off-the-wall, completely bizarre way. But she has this huge heart that I just love. She's a really interesting character.
Kurt, tell me about the process of writing this while going through recovery as well.
Well, writing the show, I wrote a whole show while I was injured, and I had a back injury. I wasn't exactly sure what was wrong with me for a while. I was trying to heal on my own, trying different things, and so I was writing. But usually, when I write these sort of things, I kind of act them out physically. I'll start walking around, and I can act out the mannerisms and stuff. So it was very frustrating to write the script and not be able to move. Or I had a very specific way of moving at that point. I was hunched over and all that. So I wrote a whole draft, and it was kind of depressing, the thing that I wrote.
Yeah.
And then I started writing. I wrote about 4 more drafts, and then the play completely changed. And I think I realized, like, subconsciously I was writing a play that there was no way that I could perform it, even like at a Fringe Festival. I wrote like a 4-person multimedia play that could not be produced as a 1-person show at a Fringe Festival. So I threw out I have it somewhere, but I threw out probably 98% of that. And it was pretty much after my surgery when I was actually, I started being able to walk around a little bit. I started writing more of it. And even when I was injured, people said, oh, you could probably have a show about this. And I thought, well, I don't know if I'm interested in that, but those experiences from the injury also made it into the show.
And Allison, how did you come into this play, I guess?
Kurt and I actually met in Saskatoon in 2006. I was touring with a solo show, and he was touring with a solo show. And I introduced myself that summer this way. Hi, I'm Allison. I'm from Aphrodite's Turn. I'm actually a director. And so from that, I ended up working with another artist who was here. And then Kurt saw some of my work with him and called me up when he was thinking about doing Last Straight Man. And we did that. And I went down to New York, because I'm from Canada, for those rehearsals. And then Kurt came up to Canada for the end process of that. And then for this one, he was thinking of doing another one, and the last show worked so well that we decided to work again together. And this one, actually, I couldn't go down as often, and so we've been rehearsing over Skype for a lot of the process, actually.
Yeah. It's actually worked out well, so.
Oh, modern media.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah, so.
We are the modern theater coming your way.
So how many times then how many other Fringes have you been to?
Well, this is the very first Friday night will be the world premiere of this show.
Oh, great.
So I have not, but I have actually done 36 Fringes over the years. So, and this is my 5th time at Saskatoon Fringe.
It'll be an interesting transition going from kind of behind the camera and on screen to live theater. Do you anticipate any kind of, I don't know, maybe just excitement even to get back on the stage?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was our experience because we've been rehearsing. We've been kind of doing the show in a vacuum, and we've been able to have a couple shows in the rehearsals, so just to show the show and get feedback. But even at the show last night, where I just did a few minutes of it, it was like, oh, people are laughing a lot. So it's kind of fascinating. Like, oh, people are laughing at everything. Well, this is good. Yeah, we've got to keep the show an hour, though. So people,
I think at those preview nights, it's always a good sell. It's an easier sell maybe if you get some chuckles out of people. And you only have 2 minutes. They're pretty strict with that.
And because it's so scattered, there's so many different characters. There's so many different storylines, and then there's the Kurt injury storyline as well. Mm-hmm. It's hard to show all of that in 2 minutes.
Right.
So trying to do a little bit of both was the way we solved that one.
Yeah,
it's kind of like I feel like I need to describe the show. I need an hour. So if you want to see what the show's about, come see it.
Yeah. So where is it again?
It's at the Cosmopolitan Seniors Center.
Yes.
Yeah, very excited about this show. Like I said, we worked really hard on it and just really excited to get this in front of an audience.
And I think this show really brings out the best from all of Kurt's past shows. He's done some personal storytelling shows. He's done some fictitious shows, and this one really marries the two talents and strengths really beautifully together, having seen his previous work. So I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah, we showed it to a few people, and one person said, it's all my strong points of all the shows without the weaknesses. And I did have a thought in my head, what are the weaknesses? And I thought, no, I'm not going to ask, just going to take that.
Yep. Just maybe you could look at what's missing, but don't dwell on that.
No,
Focus on the good.
But that's good news, so.
Yeah, great.
Okay, good.
Well, thanks for coming, guys.
Thank you very much.
I wish you all the luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cathedral City plays at the Cosmo Senior Center throughout the Fringe. The next show is Sunday at 2 p.m. Outside Joke is an improv musical group from Winnipeg, and they're here in town for the Fringe for the Summertime Party Jam. That's what they call their improv show. I'm joined in studio now by Andrea, Tom, Jane, and Toby. Welcome to CFCR.
Hello, Ishmael. Thanks for having us. This is great.
And you promised you would all talk over each other. Now, first, how does a group of people get together and decide to do improv?
We most of us did improv together in high school. There's a national competitive high school league called Canadian Improv Games. So we all did that in high school, and then we're looking for more when we left.
Yeah, it's also, a lot of us are actors too, and it's just it's a great way to get together and just jam and make up characters, and it's a great way to tell stories we found. And
it's a good way to have work when somebody else isn't giving you work.
Well, work being beer money.
So how does the storytelling happen at one of your shows?
Well, we get a suggestion from the audience, which is usually either a location or an occupation or something like that, and we allow that to serve as inspiration for our full hour-long musical that we do. So, say we got a suggestion of a lumberjack, then we'd open with a song about how wonderful it is to be a lumberjack, and just sort of go from there. The villain will come out of that too, possibly a park ranger who doesn't want people to chop down trees, and we'll just sort of riff on the suggestion for about an hour and try to tell a full, concise story.
And we add in songs at the moments of highest emotion or importance in the story.
Now, we don't have an awful lot of time, but I'd actually love to maybe get you guys to flex some of your comedic muscles here in studio for us.
For sure.
So how does this work? It's considering I'm an audience of one.
Well, what we would do, we'll get a suggestion from you. What kind of suggestion should we get?
Let's get some sort of a location.
Okay. What's an exciting location, perhaps, that you'd like to go on your honeymoon?
If this isn't too broad, let's say Hawaii.
Hawaii.
Okay. A tropical locale.
Tropical island.
We see a beach, and there are palm trees, and there are pineapples growing. I don't think pineapples grow on palm trees.
But on this
beach,
they
grow
do.
on trees.
And a young boy is scampering up those palm trees to pick the pineapples to sell so that his mother can get out of prison.
Okay. Pick the pineapples every day. Pick those pineapples, sell them on the beach. Oh, I pick those pineapples every day. Just 100,000 more till my mom gets out.
I'll take 10, I'll take 12. I'll pay you top price for your work.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Cash only, please.
Oh.
No, I don't accept checks here on the beach, and I don't have an interact machine. No, it's cash for pineapples, cash for pineapples, cash for pineapples, cash for pineapples, cash for pineapples. We're on the beach.
Waikiki, Waikiki, Honolulu. Oh, I hope my son gets me out of the slammer. I've been here for 5 years. Pineapple money ain't what it used to be, but I promise that I'm innocent. Cash for pineapples, cash for pineapples, gonna get me out of this stinking hole. Cash for pineapples, cash for pineapples, gonna get me out of this stinking hole.
Pick those pineapples every day. Pick those pineapples A-OK, and I sell those pineapples on the beach. Oh, my mama, I hope to reach you someday.
The Potash Corp Fringe Theatre Festival runs August 2nd to 11th. The Fringe Flyer plays each weekday on The Buzz at 5:30, and if you miss it, you can always catch it online at cfcr.ca, where segments will be posted. Thanks for listening.